July 16, 1999. Off the coast of Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, 9:41 p.m. A small private plane plunged into the Atlantic Ocean at over 100 miles per hour. On board, John F. Kennedy Jr., son of the assassinated president, his wife, Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, and her sister, Lauren. All three were killed instantly on impact. John Jr. was just 38 years old. He was handsome, charismatic, the heir to America's most famous political dynasty. People called him the Prince of Camelot, the most eligible bachelor in America before his marriage. And now he was dead, just like his father, just like his uncle, just like so many Kennedys before him. When the wreckage was discovered days later, investigators found no mechanical failure, no structural problem, nothing wrong with the plane. John had simply become disoriented in the dark and fog. He lost his bearings. The plane spiraled into the ocean. It was ruled pilot error, an accident. But to many Americans, it was something else, something darker, something that had been haunting the Kennedy family for nearly a century. They called it the Kennedy curse, a pattern of tragedy so consistent, so brutal, so unrelenting that it seemed impossible to be mere coincidence. Assassinations, plane crashes, drug overdoses, skiing accidents, murder, suicide, lobotomies. For over 80 years, the Kennedy family has been struck by disaster after disaster, death after death. Some say it's just statistics, the price of a large, risk-taking family in the public eye. Others believe something darker is at work, a curse, punishment for the sins of the father. This is the story of the Kennedy curse. From the ruthless patriarch who built an empire on bootlegging and stock manipulation, to the children and grandchildren who have paid the price in blood. 3 generations of tragedy, of promise destroyed, of lives cut short in the most horrific ways imaginable. This is the Kennedy curse, America's royal family tragedy. To understand the curse, you must first understand the man who started it all. Joseph Patrick Kennedy, Joe Kennedy, the patriarch. He was born in 1888 in Boston, Massachusetts, to Irish Catholic immigrant parents. In the late 19th century, Irish Catholics were second-class citizens in Boston. The city was dominated by wealthy Protestant families, the Brahmins, who controlled the banks, businesses, and politics. Irish Catholics were poor, discriminated against, shut out of power. Joe Kennedy's father, Patrick Kennedy, was a saloon keeper and local ward boss, a minor political operative, respectable enough for the Irish community, but nothing compared to the Protestant elite. Joe Kennedy hated being looked down upon. He was ambitious, ruthless, and determined to become richer and more powerful than any of the Protestant families who had sneered at him, and he didn't care how he did it. By age 25, Joe Kennedy had become the youngest bank president in America through political connections and aggressive maneuvering. During World War I, he managed a shipyard, making valuable connections with military and political leaders. But his real fortune came during Prohibition. From 1920 to 1933, the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol was illegal in the United States. But that didn't stop people from drinking. It just created a massive black market controlled by organized crime. Joe Kennedy saw an opportunity. He became a bootlegger, smuggling illegal alcohol from Canada and Europe into the United States. Now, the Kennedy family has always denied this. They claim Joe made his money through legitimate investments. But multiple sources, including organized crime figures and Kennedy family associates, have confirmed Joe's involvement in bootlegging. He worked with mobsters, he bribed Coast Guard officials, he used his ships to smuggle hundreds of thousands of cases of illegal liquor. He made millions. When Prohibition ended in 1933, Joe switched to legal alcohol distribution. He secured exclusive U.S. distribution rights for Scotch whiskey brands. Another fortune. But Joe Kennedy wasn't satisfied with just being rich. He wanted power, influence, respect. He wanted his family to become American royalty. So he invested heavily in Hollywood in the 1920s and 30s. He bought film studios. He produced movies. He had affairs with actresses, including Gloria Swanson. He moved to New York and began manipulating the stock market, using insider trading and market manipulation techniques that would later be made illegal. By the 1930s, Joe Kennedy was worth hundreds of millions in today's dollars. But the Protestant elite still looked down on him. He was still Irish, still Catholic, still an outsider. So Joe decided on a different strategy. If he couldn't be accepted by the establishment, his children would be. He would create a political dynasty. His sons would become senators, governors, presidents. The Kennedy name would become synonymous with American power. Joe Kennedy had 9 children with his wife, Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy, Joseph Jr., the eldest son, brilliant, athletic, destined to be president. John, the second son, sickly as a child but intelligent and charming. Rosemary, the eldest daughter, beautiful but mentally disabled. Kathleen, called Kick, vivacious and rebellious. Eunice, Patricia, Robert, Jean, and Edward, the younger children. Joe Sr. had a plan for each of them. The boys would go into politics. The girls would marry powerful men. Nothing would stand in the way of the Kennedy dynasty, nothing except the curse that was about to begin. The first tragedy struck in 1941. Rosemary Kennedy, Joe's third child and eldest daughter, was born in 1918. From early childhood, it was clear something was wrong. She struggled to keep up with her siblings intellectually. She had violent mood swings. As she entered her 20s, she became increasingly difficult to control. Joe Kennedy was terrified. He had built an image of the perfect American family. A daughter with mental disabilities didn't fit that image. He became obsessed with fixing her. In 1941, Joe heard about a new experimental procedure called a lobotomy. Doctors claimed it could cure mental illness, aggression, and mood disorders by surgically severing connections in the brain's prefrontal cortex. Joe made the decision without consulting his wife or other children. At age 23, Rosemary Kennedy was taken to a hospital where doctors drilled holes into her skull and inserted a surgical instrument into her brain. The procedure was a catastrophe. Rosemary emerged with the mental capacity of a 2-year-old. She could barely speak. She couldn't walk properly. She was incontinent. Joe Kennedy had destroyed his daughter's mind. He immediately hid her away in an institution in Wisconsin. For 20 years, the family didn't visit her. Joe told people she was teaching mentally disabled children. The truth was kept secret. Rose Kennedy didn't even know where her daughter was for years. Rosemary would live in that institution for 63 years until her death in 2005. The perfect Kennedy image was preserved, but the first victim of Joe's ambition had been claimed, and the tragedies were just beginning. August 12, 1944, over the English Channel during World War II. Lieutenant Joseph Kennedy Jr., the eldest son, the one destined to be president, was piloting a bomber on a secret mission. The mission, Operation Aphrodite, was essentially a suicide run. Planes were loaded with explosives and flown by remote control toward German targets. The pilot's job was to get the plane airborne, arm the explosives, then parachute out before the plane was taken over by remote control. It was incredibly dangerous. Joe Jr. didn't have to volunteer. He had already completed his required missions. He could have gone home. But Joe Jr. was intensely competitive with his younger brother John, who had recently become a war hero after his PT boat was sunk in the Pacific. Joe Jr. wanted to be a hero too. He wanted to outshine his brother. On August 12th, Joe Jr. and his co-pilot took off in a plane loaded with 21,000 pounds of explosives. 18 minutes into the flight, the plane exploded in mid-air. The blast was so powerful it was seen from the ground in England. Witnesses described a massive fireball. No bodies were ever recovered. Joseph Kennedy Jr., age 29, was vaporized. The family was devastated. Joe Sr.'s entire plan had been built around his eldest son becoming president. Now that son was gone. Joe Sr. fell into a deep depression. For weeks, he barely spoke. But eventually, he made a decision. If Joe Jr. couldn't be president, then John would be. The second son would have to fulfill the father's ambitions, and John F. Kennedy's political career began. 1948, London, England. Kathleen Kennedy, called Kick, the vivacious, rebellious daughter, had caused a scandal by marrying a Protestant British nobleman during the war. Her husband, William Cavendish, Marquis of Hartington, was killed in action in 1944, just 4 months after their wedding. Kick, widowed at 24, stayed in England. She was beautiful, charming, beloved by British high society. In 1948, she fell in love again, this time with Peter Fitzwilliam, a wealthy married Protestant earl who was in the process of divorcing his wife. Joe Kennedy was furious, another Protestant, and this one wasn't even divorced yet. It would be another scandal. But Kick was determined. She flew to France to meet with her father, hoping to convince him to accept the relationship. On May 13, 1948, Kick and Peter Fitzwilliam boarded a small private plane in France to fly to the Riviera. The weather was terrible. Storms, heavy rain. The pilot should never have taken off. The plane flew into a mountain in the French Alps. Everyone on board was killed instantly. Kathleen Kennedy was 28 years old. 2 of Joe Kennedy's children were now dead, both in plane crashes. The Kennedy curse was taking shape. John F. Kennedy, the second son who never expected to be in politics, rose rapidly. He was elected to Congress in 1946, to the Senate in 1952, and in 1960, at age 43, he became the youngest elected president in American history. The Kennedys had finally made it. They were America's royal family. The press called JFK's administration Camelot, President Kennedy, his elegant wife Jackie, their beautiful children, Caroline and John Jr. Attorney General Robert Kennedy, the president's brother and closest advisor, Senator Edward Kennedy, the youngest brother, being groomed for his own political future. The family was at the height of its power. And then came Dallas, November 22, 1963. President Kennedy was in Dallas, Texas, for a political visit. He rode in an open-top limousine through downtown Dallas, waving to crowds. At 12:30 p.m., as the motorcade passed through Dealey Plaza, shots rang out. The president was hit twice, once in the upper back, once in the head. The headshot was catastrophic. Part of his skull was blown off. Brain matter splattered across the limousine, across Jackie's pink suit. Jackie crawled onto the back of the car, trying to retrieve pieces of her husband's skull. President Kennedy was rushed to Parkland Hospital. Doctors tried to save him, but the damage was too severe. At 1 p.m., John F. Kennedy was pronounced dead. He was 46 years old. Vice President Lyndon Johnson was sworn in as president aboard Air Force One 2 hours later. Jackie Kennedy stood beside him, still wearing her blood-stained suit. Within hours, police arrested Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine who had worked at the building from which the shots were allegedly fired. 2 days later, on November 24th, as Oswald was being transferred between jails, a nightclub owner named Jack Ruby pushed through the crowd and shot Oswald in the stomach at point-blank range. Oswald died 2 hours later. The only person officially accused of killing the president was now dead. He never stood trial. He never testified. And the questions began. Was Oswald the only shooter? Was there a conspiracy? Did the Mafia do it? The CIA? The Soviets? Fidel Castro? To this day, conspiracy theories surround JFK's assassination. and they will never be fully answered. But one thing is certain, the Kennedy curse had claimed its most famous victim. Robert F. Kennedy, Bobby, was destroyed by his brother's death. He had been more than the president's brother. He had been his closest advisor, his attorney general, his enforcer. Bobby had waged war against organized crime, prosecuting mob bosses that his father had once worked with. After JFK's assassination, Bobby fell into a deep depression. He questioned everything: his faith, his purpose, his future. But by 1968, Bobby decided to run for president himself. He entered the Democratic primary race as an anti-war candidate, opposing the Vietnam War that had escalated after his brother's death. Bobby was passionate, charismatic, beloved by minorities and young people. He seemed destined to win the nomination. On June 5, 1968, Bobby won the California primary, a crucial victory. Just after midnight, he gave a victory speech at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. "On to Chicago, and let's win there!" he shouted to cheering supporters, referencing the Democratic National Convention. Bobby left the stage through the hotel kitchen, shaking hands with kitchen staff. Suddenly, a young Palestinian man named Sirhan stepped forward with a revolver and began firing. Bobby was hit 3 times. Once in the head at point-blank range, he fell to the floor, bleeding. Hotel staff and supporters tackled Sirhan. Bobby was rushed to the hospital. For 26 hours, doctors fought to save him, but the damage was too severe. On June 6, 1968, at 1:44 a.m., Robert F. Kennedy died. He was 42 years old. 5 years after John F. Kennedy's assassination, another Kennedy had been murdered. 2 brothers, both shot, both killed while pursuing the presidency. The curse was undeniable. Edward Kennedy, Ted, was the youngest of the Kennedy brothers, the only one left alive. By 1969, Ted was a senator from Massachusetts, popular and ambitious. Many believed he would eventually run for president. But on July 18, 1969, Ted Kennedy destroyed his political future. He was on Chappaquiddick Island in Massachusetts, attending a party for campaign workers from his brother Bobby's presidential campaign. Late that night, Ted left the party with Mary Jo Kopechne, a 28-year-old campaign worker, in his car. What happened next has never been fully explained. Ted Kennedy drove off a bridge into a tidal channel. The car flipped upside down and sank. Ted somehow escaped the car and swam to safety. Mary Jo Kopechne did not. She was trapped in the submerged car. An air pocket kept her alive for some time. She likely suffocated slowly over hours as the oxygen ran out. Ted Kennedy did not report the accident until the next morning, 10 hours after it happened. He did not call police. He did not call for rescue divers. He walked back to his hotel and went to bed. By the time he reported the accident, Mary Jo Kopechne was dead. The scandal destroyed Ted Kennedy's presidential ambitions. Questions about what really happened, why he waited so long to report it, whether he was drunk, whether there was a cover-up, have never been fully answered. Ted Kennedy pled guilty to leaving the scene of an accident. He received a 2-month suspended sentence. He remained a senator for another 40 years, becoming one of the most influential legislators in American history. But he never ran for president. The curse had claimed another Kennedy's ambitions, if not his life. And the tragedies didn't stop. In 1973, Edward Kennedy Jr., Ted's 12-year-old son, was diagnosed with bone cancer. His right leg was amputated above the knee. In 1984, David Kennedy, Bobby's son, died of a drug overdose in a hotel room in Palm Beach, Florida. He was 28 years old. David had struggled with addiction for years, haunted by witnessing his father's assassination on live television when he was just 12 years old. In 1997, Michael Kennedy, another of Bobby's sons, died in a skiing accident in Aspen, Colorado. He was playing ski football, an incredibly dangerous game, and crashed into a tree at high speed. He was 39 years old. In 1999, as we began this story, John F. Kennedy Jr. crashed his plane into the Atlantic Ocean, killing himself, his wife, and his sister-in-law. He was 38 years old. In 2011, Cara Kennedy, Ted's daughter, died of a heart attack after a workout at a health club. She was 51 years old. In 2012, Mary Richardson Kennedy, the estranged wife of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., hanged herself in a barn at her home in New York. She had struggled with depression and alcoholism. In 2019, Sayasa Kennedy Hill, Bobby's granddaughter, died of a drug overdose at the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport, Massachusetts. She was 22 years old. In 2020, Maeve Kennedy McKean and her 8-year-old son, Gideon, were canoeing in Chesapeake Bay when their canoe was swept out into deeper water. Both drowned. Maeve was 40 years old. 3 generations, decades of tragedy, assassinations, overdoses, accidents, suicides, the Kennedy curse. So is it real? Is there actually a curse on the Kennedy family? Statistically, the Kennedys have suffered an extraordinary number of tragic deaths. But skeptics point out that the Kennedys are also an extraordinarily large family. Joe and Rose Kennedy had 9 children. Those 9 children had dozens of children. Those children had dozens more. And the Kennedys are risk takers. They ski aggressively, they fly small planes, they engage in dangerous sports, they enter politics, which historically has been a dangerous profession. They also struggle with addiction, depression, and mental illness, problems that run in families and have likely been exacerbated by the trauma of losing so many family members. From this perspective, the Kennedy curse is simply statistics. A large, risk-taking family will inevitably suffer tragedies, but others see something darker. They point to Joe Kennedy's ruthlessness, his bootlegging with mobsters, his stock manipulation, his alleged affairs, his willingness to lobotomize his own daughter to protect the family image. Some believe Joe made a deal with dark forces, whether metaphorical or literal, to achieve power and wealth, and his children and grandchildren have been paying the price ever since. There are even those who believe the assassinations weren't random, that JFK and Bobby were killed because Joe Kennedy had betrayed the mob. During Prohibition, Joe worked with organized crime. But when JFK became president and appointed Bobby as Attorney General, Bobby declared war on the mafia, prosecuting mob bosses aggressively. The mob felt betrayed, and according to some theories, they took revenge. Of course, these are just theories, speculation, there's no definitive proof. But the pattern is undeniable. The Kennedy family has been struck by tragedy after tragedy in ways that seem to defy probability. So what happened to the Kennedy dynasty? Ted Kennedy, the last of Joe's sons, died in 2009 of brain cancer at age 77. He never became president. The dynasty his father dreamed of never fully materialized. But the Kennedy name still carries enormous weight in American politics. Joseph Kennedy III, Bobby's grandson, served in Congress until 2021. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Bobby's son, ran for president in 2024 before dropping out and endorsing Donald Trump in a controversial move that split the family. The Kennedys remain one of America's most famous families, but they are no longer the untouchable political dynasty they once were. The curse, whether real or simply a series of tragic coincidences, has taken too many of them. The compound in Hyannisport, Massachusetts, where the family gathered for decades, is still there. But it's quieter now. Fewer family members, too many ghosts. In 1994, Jackie Kennedy Onassis, JFK's widow, died of cancer at age 64. Before her death, she was asked about the Kennedy curse, about the tragedies that had struck the family again and again. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I think we've had more than our share, but I also think we've had more than our share of glory. Glory and tragedy, power and loss. That has been the Kennedy story." Joe Kennedy built an empire. He made his family rich and powerful beyond imagination, but the cost has been staggering. 2 sons assassinated, 1 daughter lobotomized and institutionalized for life, another daughter killed in a plane crash, grandchildren dead from overdoses, accidents, suicide, drowning, great-grandchildren still struggling with addiction and the weight of the family name. The Kennedy curse. Whether you believe in it or not, the pattern is real. And it raises a question that has haunted American culture for decades. Was it worth it? Today, when Americans think of the Kennedys, they think of Camelot, of JFK's charm and wit, of Bobby's passion for justice, of the grace and elegance of Jackie Kennedy. But they also think of Dallas, of the Ambassador Hotel, of Chappaquiddick, of plane crashes and overdoses. The Kennedys represent the best and worst of the American dream. Immigrants who rose to the heights of power and wealth, who served their country, who inspired millions, but also a family that sacrificed everything, including their own children, in pursuit of that power. Joe Kennedy's ghost haunts his descendants. The sins of the father visited upon the children. 3 generations of Kennedys have paid the price for his ambition. And the question remains, will there be a 4th generation? Or has the Kennedy dynasty finally come to an end? The curse, real or imagined, has taken too many. The glory Joe Kennedy dreamed of has been drowned in blood and tragedy. The Kennedy curse, America's royal family tragedy, a cautionary tale of ambition, power, and the terrible price of pursuing greatness at any cost.